I want to commend the task force for putting this event on. I'm fortunate enough that I get to travel around pretty much all of Central Appalachia, working with different communities that are approaching sustainable development, differently, each of them in their own unique ways. And what I say all the time to every community is that, we could really use a periscope sometimes to see over the mountain to the next community over and see what they're doing, because there's a lot that we can learn from one another. I've definitely learned a lot today, and I really commend the way that you guys are approaching sustainable development in the county. It's something that I'm definitely jealous of. I was sitting over here thinking, man, if I could only convince my county commission to approach sustainable development the same way. I've been trying for years, but maybe after this I'll go up and say, hey, why don't you guys drive up north, go see. So yeah, my name is Joey James. I work for a consulting firm called Downstream Strategies based in Morgantown, West Virginia, home of the Mountaineers. My work at Downstream, we're an environmental and economic development consulting firm. My work really bridges those two arms of the company. I focus on innovative reuse of brownfields. Raise your hand if you know what a brownfield is. Yeah, so for those of you in the room that may not know, a brownfield is there's a lot of definitions for what a brownfield is, but my favorite definition is that it's a former industrial or commercial site whose reuse is conflicted by real or perceived environmental liabilities. So key term there, perceived. So a brownfield, doesn't necessarily have to have environmental liabilities, just be perceived as that. Oh. Yeah, so a little bit about Downstream Strategies. So Downstream has 3 offices in West Virginia, one in Morgantown, one in Davis up in Canaan Valley, and then one down south in the Greenbrier Valley in Lewisburg. We were founded in 1997, started just as a traditional environmental consulting firm that was working primarily for nonprofits, but our work has since expanded into this economic development world. While we only have offices in West Virginia, we do work all over the place, including quite a bit in Pennsylvania, but also some global work, luckily. So our work broadly strengthens economies, sustains healthy environments, and builds resilient communities. What we aim to do is weave natural resource stewardship with economic development. So we are the very first solar-powered consultant in West Virginia and potentially beyond that. Just some notable work areas that we at Downstream focus on. This is my "You May Know Me From" list. We work on source water protection, ecological restoration, local food systems planning and development, litigation support / expert testimony, solid waste management, economic resilience planning, climate change resilience planning, brownfield / mine land assessment and reuse, community development support, economic assessment, energy systems research and development, and broadly, I'll say policy. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so quickly, before we start diving in on the meat of the presentation, I just want to quickly go over really how I ended up in this space and, and why I feel like this conversation is really relevant today. So we've lost nearly 60,000 mining jobs locally since 2011. Well, between the fourth quarter of 2011 and the fourth quarter of 2016, lost nearly 60,000 mining jobs. 12,500 of those jobs were lost in West Virginia, accounting for roughly 1.64% of the total workforce. So this is something that we're feeling in every community. I can't walk outside. I live in Morgantown, which is seen by some as being almost untouched by this decline, but I can't walk out my front door without seeing it. So compounding these issues with job losses that we felt in Appalachia is the unfathomable amount of environmental degradation our states are dealing with as a result of the century and a half or so of mining. In my home state, West Virginia, we have over 550 square miles of strip mine land. And these sites, these mine sites result in things like acid mine drainage, erosion, sedimentation, sinkholes, ash piles, slate piles, and broken down old equipment that hasn't been touched for decades, just out there sitting and causing problems. So we have massive job losses, environmental degradation across the state, all these mine sites. What does that get us? Where are we at? So in the wake of this, we're actually seeing unprecedented public and private interest in mine land redevelopment and growing interest in what I'll refer to today as a restoration economy. So this really highlights the need for well-planned economic development. We've all seen it before. A certain funding stream comes into town, and you have to scramble to get your grant applications in order to go after that money and get some projects built. And so with the opportunity, the public and private investment that's now going into the restoration economy, now's the time for us to plan and to really develop a queue of projects. So what is the restoration economy? So the restoration economy refers to economic growth that is based on repurposing, renewing, and reconnecting the natural built and socioeconomic environments. Wow. If I can think of an idea that epitomizes a lot of the things that we've talked about today, it's a restoration economy. I think Chuck Norris right there agrees. So really my understanding of and my approach to the restoration economy has been framed over the last 3 years, largely due to my work on two particularly impactful projects that I'm going to talk to you about today. Both of these projects, though, I should note, focused around innovative abandoned mine land reuse. So today's buzzword. We're all familiar with buzzwords. From the conversations that we've had about the restoration economy has risen this idea of innovative mine reclamation. So when I say innovative mine reclamation, what exactly do I mean? And I'll say that the community partners that I work with, we found ourselves explaining innovative mine reclamation and kind of continuously changing what that definition was. And so we decided that it would be important in order for us to define what innovative mine reclamation is, to come up with some guiding principles so that we could inform our future work within that realm. So I'll just quickly go over the 6 guiding principles of innovative mine reclamation. So innovative mine reclamation, you must go above and beyond legal reclamation requirements for AML features and bond forfeiture properties to create sites that are primed for sustainable development, native ecosystem restoration, or both. Projects must be appropriate to the specific place they're occurring. We don't want to see a golf course next to a community that could use a farm. Projects must be inclusive of multiple stakeholders, community stakeholders, especially in addition to the traditional decision makers. So we don't want, just the idea for the reuse of a site to come only from the county commission. We want to see it from all different levels. Ideally, it's going to promote environmental sustainability, but at least the project is not going to cause any additional harm to the environment. The project must be financially viable beyond an initial grant period if it's funded by a grant. And lastly, and probably most importantly, the idea is that we're introducing new viable concepts to the Appalachian coal fields that could be successfully replicated across the region. So recognizing that the money that we have available to reclaim and reuse some of these mine sites is very, very limited. In order to maximize that impact of that money, we want to make sure that that we are employing ideas that could be replicated elsewhere. So just a quick term review again before we dive in. So when I say AML, I'm talking about abandoned mine lands. So these are sites that were mined prior to the passage of SMACRA. That's right around 1977. So these sites were not reclaimed to any sort of standards. When I talk about the AML Fund, I'm talking about money that's collected through a reclamation fee assessed on each ton of coal that's mined. That then goes into a fund that is used to remediate some of those problems that you see on those abandoned mine land features that I've mentioned. And then lastly, the projects that I'm talking about largely focus around AML Pilot, which is a program that we've had around since 2016. It's a congressionally appropriated economic development fund for projects on or adjacent to abandoned mine land sites. So in Pennsylvania, y'all get $25 million per year. West Virginia gets $25 million. Kentucky gets $25 million. Ohio, Alabama, and Virginia all get $10 million. And the Navajo, Hopi, and the Crow each get $3.33 million. And that's basically the states that have abandoned mine land programs that have the highest number of public health and safety risk AML features. And as you might know, Pennsylvania has the highest number. So that AML pilot program has been used to fund things all the way from water infrastructure to maker spaces to value-added meat processing facilities. So what does an AML site look like? I have a big long list there of what an AML site looks like, but I actually have included here a map of Indiana County with the AML inventory overlaid. How many of you drove by an AML site on the way here today? Or looking at that map, think you might have driven by an AML site on the way here today. You have over 920 abandoned mine land features in your county. And that's out of about 12,000 total in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot in Indiana County. So an AML site, it's not a massive mine site. It could be a acid mine drainage discharge. It could just be a portal into a mine. Both of these are AML sites. Could be a gob pile somewhere. That compares to the post SMACRA mine sites, which are much larger and have been reclaimed to certain standards. So, like I said, the cleanup of these sites right now, and where I focus my energy on, is the AML Fund, accessing money in the AML Fund, and AML Pilot. So the first stop on our Appalachian journey here is the far southwest corner of Virginia. So this is a project that I completed back in 2016 and 2017 with an environmental advocacy group, Appalachian Voices, and a coal mining engineering firm. So what I'll say, I think renewable energy is a great example of this, but just this in the transitional economy, I think we make interesting bedfellows, and so here I was as a consultant working with a environmental advocacy firm that had once sued the coal companies that entirely employed this mining engineering firm, but we were all working towards, a solution to some of the problems in Southwest Virginia. So I think that's one of the things that's really special about this moment that we're in right now is that, traditional adversaries are no longer adversaries. Everybody needs to come to the table, when we're finding solutions to the future. So the idea behind this project, again, this is back in 2016, was that the Reclaim Act was pending passage. So the Reclaim Act is basically an expedited, it's still technically pending passage. It would be an expedited release of the traditional AML fund for projects that have an economic development nexus. And so money for remediation of AML sites and economic development seemed imminent. And so if that money was going to drop, Appalachian Voices in Southwest Virginia had the foresight to say, we need to have a queue of basically well-planned, well-vetted projects so that when that money drops, we can say to our local leaders, hey, these are the types of projects that we want to see you spend that money on, and these are the reasons why. And so they had contracted Downstream Strategies and the coal mining engineering firm, and we went to work identifying projects. And really, this first project, the project of identifying projects, we went through a whole process of figuring out, okay, so how exactly do we identify innovative mine reclamation projects that would result in the types of economic benefits that we want to see? And so our first approach, I guess my natural inclination as a numbers guy, was to let the data tell us what AML sites would be best for what type of economic development, and then get community buy-in afterwards. And so we went through this whole long, convoluted process of basically identifying a methodology to identify sites and then take them to the communities. And then we realized after this big, long process, a lot of times the communities didn't want to see the projects that we had identified for those sites. So things are much more simple now. We've and it makes complete sense. If you want a project to succeed, it has to grow from the community. So we've landed on letting the community tell us what they want to do, and then matching them with a site, because these AML sites are everywhere. And so the result of this project was that we had overwhelming interest and buy-in from the community about the fact that there was this pending pot of money that we thought was going to drop. We established quite a few very, very diverse partnerships. Again, as I mentioned before, some interesting bedfellows. We provided 6 recommendations to state and federal agencies, but probably most importantly, we identified 14 projects that we felt modeled the types of remediation and economic development activities that we wanted to see. And these projects really ranged from just being a twinkle in someone's eye, so not a whole lot of research had actually gone into it, to being a pretty well vetted project, entirely planned, basically ready for construction. So, and then the Reclaim Act unfortunately doesn't pass. So we just did all this work and have all these projects ready to go. The community's excited about it. The Reclaim Act doesn't pass, but it's all right. And that's because planning is important. If you put a plan on a shelf and forget about it, you'll forget about it and it won't be implemented. But if you keep it out on your table and you say, how are we going to get that funded? You can get projects funded. So just a couple examples of some successful projects that really grew out of this initial work with Appalachian Voices. So in that initial report, we had identified a commercial aquaculture facility that would utilize a clean discharge from a mine site as a project that could potentially be funded with the Reclaim Act as it was drafted then. Again, the Reclaim Act didn't pass, but we went through this whole process of planning for this aquaculture facility, a funding stream that we'll talk about in a minute ended up coming along, and rather than I guess, doing that project where on the site that we had identified before. We did it a few miles away, actually, in West Virginia, in the town of Kermit. It was one of the first AML pilot projects funded. It's actually under construction right now. They're building an aquaculture facility adjacent to a former mine site that, at least when it was initially planned, it was going to be taking advantage of some discharge from that mine, but we found that the discharge was inadequate for a number of reasons. But still, that project would not have happened if it wouldn't have been for that plan that we had set in place, a year previous for a different funding stream. So another example of that is is called the Devils Bathtub, and this was actually BuzzFeed famous. You might have seen it floating around Facebook a few years ago. A really, really scenic trail in Southwest Virginia that actually kind of wraps around two abandoned mineland features, two portals. That right now it's a public safety issue because those portals are wide open. We were able to fund that, through a later project. Yeah. So the second stop. And we'll very quickly go through this, is a cross-state collaboration that I'm working on, and that's actually funded through the Just Transition Fund. Thank you very much. Called the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition. So the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition aims to grow this community of practice around innovative mine reclamation and innovative land reuse in Central Appalachia, and it does that by identifying these projects like we did in that previous project, but publicizing it across, 4 states and working with 4 state organizations. And it takes advantage of that AML Pilot Fund that I had mentioned before. So we've gotten actually now up to about $15 million of AML pilot money in the last about a year and a half for 8 different projects in these 4 states. And that $15 million leverages about another $14 million in private investment, private and public investment through other streams. So just a few examples of projects. Go back like 3 slides. Yep, there you go. So are any of you in the room familiar with the Cheat River? So whitewater rafting jet destination, very scenic area. An especially scenic part of the Cheat River is known as the Narrows. And the Narrows is virtually inaccessible unless you're on a raft. But there happens to be an abandoned rail line that was used to service some of the mines that were in that area previously. And so this project purchased that abandoned rail line and is now converting it into a rail trail that includes an acid mine drainage learning park. And part of that project is also known as a Trail Towns program, which is basically working with local entrepreneurs to teach them how to access the recreation economy and utilize this great asset of the trail to grow their own business. Another example is from our partner in Ohio, Rural Action, and Ohio University. They're actually utilizing acid mine drainage discharge to create a paint pigment and selling that paint pigment to specialty markets. So you can see here that orange color is pretty attractive, and some people are willing to pay a lot of money for that color of orange. So they're literally taking something that's a waste and turning it into a business. Another one in Kentucky that we're actually seeking funding for right now is known as the Affordable Green Energy Subdivision. And so the idea here is that we're promoting renewable energy, we're promoting energy efficiency across rural Appalachia, but there's really a lack of places where people can use some of these skills. And so the idea here was that we were going to build a subdivision that would model all of these different types of technologies and teach people how to build energy efficient structures or install renewable energy. And lastly, probably the one that I'm most proud of is in rural Southwest Virginia in Wise County. We worked with a data center and a solar developer to now, it's in construction, build the first large-scale solar site on an AML in the coal fields of Virginia. And the idea of this project is that it would act as a springboard for a group known as the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia to basically figure out how to maximize the economic output of large-scale solar in the coal fields. So the state of Virginia is a really unique place when you look at the growth of renewable energy. A lot of it's happening up in the Northeast, when the people down in the Southwest could really use the economic development opportunities associated with it. So looking forward in 2020, the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition is expanding its geography of focus. We're going to be looking for projects in Pennsylvania. And looking for community organizations to partner with to seek that money for projects. Like I said, you have 920 sites in Indiana County, so come to me with some projects and let's get some money. So just some final takeaways. Funding streams may change, but the idea of a restoration economy really isn't going away. Planning pays off. As you can see, you may be working towards something right now, and that's why you're developing the plan, and the plan may end up getting funded through something entirely different. It's our duty as people that are knowledgeable about these different funding streams. You now are knowledgeable about AML Pilot, to get the word out to community members, to make sure that we are engaging people and getting the types of projects that community members want to see. We need to figure out the best way to leverage the limited investment that we have now. And so that's, again, looking to communities that are going through similar processes to learn and how you can be more efficient. And finally, can be scary for some people, we need to objectively assess the effectiveness of what we're investing in and intervene where necessary. Sometimes things don't always go as we expect them to, and we need to recognize when we might be headed down the wrong path and adjust accordingly. And so that was a little bit over, but
We'll take one question, and any questions that we might have missed, we have a reflection period after Jenica and Chloe present. We'll have a reflection period where you can ask those questions and speak to the speakers.
Some of these sites presumably would be subject to remining before the project is accomplished. What's your view of that approach?
Yeah, so we have not had to deal with that, but I think that if there's a market for remining of these sites, we would prefer that the coal that was mined already and the environmental damage that happened isn't happening for no reason. So, take advantage of what has been mined. But I think that the goal of the Reclaiming Appalachia Coalition is that we would do no more environmental damage than what had already been done.
All right. Thank you very much, Joey. Joey Jones, everybody.